This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard but didn't. Banking analyst predicts another 25% drop in home prices. 79 weeks of unemployment checks isn't enough. Arizona budget shortfall cuts off medical insurance for 10,000 parents. America, world's largest arms dealer. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, September 13th, 2009. Banking analyst Meredith Whitney is calling for national home prices to drop another 25%. Ms. Whitney became known for accurately calling the Citibank implosion in 2007, when most other analysts were saying Citi was well capitalized. She also predicted last year that credit cards would be the next shoe to drop. And she correctly called that bank stocks were oversold in March of this year. In an appearance on CNBC this past week, she gave her thoughts on the current state of home prices. Take a look.
Famed analyst, it says, famed analyst Meredith Whitney, the founder and CEO
I wrote that.
Meredith Whitney Advisory Group. I'm sure you did. We touched briefly on home prices earlier in the last half hour. You think they have another 25% on the downside?
Yes, it's just a question of time. So the can's been punted down the road. If you talk even to regulators and say, what do you think home ownership returns to, what level? It's at 67% today. They all say 65%. That means obviously less demand, equals supply, and house prices go down further. But unemployment, no bank underwrote a loan with 10% unemployment on the horizon, because the majority, over $7 trillion of loans, were underwritten with under 6% unemployment assumptions. So I think that there's no doubt that home prices go down dramatically from here, or meaningfully from here. It's just a question of when.
Which would be peak to trough 50% or so, right?
Yeah.
Does the vicious cycle come back?
It's just a supply jam. So I don't know about the vicious cycle necessarily. You've got very strong variables that make the odds of this happening, unavoidable, which are you have obviously a natural rate of home ownership, which is about 64%. You have rising unemployment, people having difficulty keeping up with their payments, exotic resets coming forth. Yep. And then you have issues of chronically underfunded state and local governments. So 44 states have to balance their budget, and most states are underwater, and the states that are most underwater are Florida, Arizona, Nevada, and California. Now, Florida is still got a massive leg to go down. So when you see unemployment and furloughs and the government pull back from spending, then you'll see another wave.
50% peak to trough translates to national home prices falling from a 2006 high of $230,000 down to $115,000. The current average price for a home is at $170,000. She said it was not a matter of if, but when. A scary result if Ms. Whitney's predictions, like her other predictions, comes true. Over 358,000 properties received a default or auction notice or were seized last month, according to data provider RealtyTrack, Inc. That was slightly lower than July's count, but there are still a lot of people losing their homes every month. Former Federal Reserve Board economist Morris Davis said in an interview, the foreclosure numbers are largely unemployment related. As long as 15 million Americans are unemployed, record foreclosures will continue. Mr. Davis tells only half the story, as mortgage resets still account for many defaults. In an article this week in the New York Times, mortgage resets will weigh on the housing market well into 2014. Interest-only loans represent an especially large problem. There are 2.8 million active interest-only home loans worth a combined total of $908 billion. The interest-only periods, which put off the principal payments of 5, 7, or 10 years, are now beginning to expire. In the next 12 months, $71 billion of interest-only loans will reset. Even after mid-2011, another $400 billion will reset. In 2004, nearly half of all buyers in California took out an interest-only loan. Mark Goldman, a San Diego mortgage broker, said many interest-only buyers thought they would be in control when the loans reset. They expected to move or refinance, but you can't do either when you're underwater. He went on to say, if you purchased your home with an interest-only loan between 2003 and 2006, you're cooked. Roughly 6 million people were collecting long-term unemployment benefits at the end of August, according to the Labor Department. Congress has already extended unemployment benefits up to 79 weeks from the normal 26 weeks. Some 1.5 million unemployed Americans could exhaust those benefits by the end of the year, according to the National Employment Law Project. House of Rep Speaker Nancy Pelosi said on Thursday, "We cannot let that run out. It's pretty clear-cut. This is very necessary for us to address that." In August, bankruptcy filings were up 22% compared with the prior year. Even wealthy families are being hit as filings jumped 73% for those with over $1 million in debt. The increase in bankruptcies is largely due to rising unemployment, but to add insult to injury, Americans' household income last year took the sharpest drop since the government began keeping records in 1947. Median household income sank 3.6% to $50,303 after adjusting for government-calculated inflation. Sheldon Danziger of the Population Studies Center at the University of Michigan says that 2009 is going to be a dreadful year. He predicts income will drop at least 5% this year because of rising unemployment in the recession's second year. With incomes dropping, about 39.8 million Americans are living in poverty, up from 37.3 million in 2007. The government defines poverty as an annual income of $22,025 for a family of 4. That's about 40 million people trying to survive on $6,000 a year. Due to Arizona's recent state budget cuts, nearly 10,000 working parents will lose their health insurance. Families received letters last week informing them that parents will have no insurance as of October 1st. Children covered by Kids Care will keep their health insurance. To be eligible for coverage, families had to make less than 2 times the federal poverty level, or about $44,000 a year for a family of 4. Any parent that was covered in the program that had a medical procedure scheduled for October 1st or after is on their own to cover the cost. The state of Arizona had a program to insure low-income parents and then pulls the rug out with less than 1 month's notice. The program was federally subsidized and should have provided for a longer notice period so families can try to find other alternatives. All of our previous stories are in stark contrast to the assessment provided by Fed Chairman Bernanke this week that the recession is very likely over. Technically, Bernanke may be right in that an end of a recession may be measured by an expansion in gross domestic product. Growing GDP is not hard when you're printing money. Just look at Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's GDP, as measured in their own currency, has grown exponentially because they've been trying to print their way to prosperity. The Fed and U.S. government have created a few $1 trillion in the last year, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it will inflate our GDP. No nation in the history of the world has ever printed its way to prosperity, but the United States is giving it a go. As credit is cut off for Americans, more and more are switching to debit cards. This week, the New York Times had a good article about the fee traps that banks set on unsuspecting customers. Services like overdraft protection schemes provide a false sense of security, but actually bombard the cardholder with fees. We have provided a link to the full article in our video description section. The one sector of the economy that is seeing record growth is U.S. government arms sales. Pentagon figures showed that the United States is close to a new peak in government-to-government arms sales, poised to top last year's record of $36.4 billion. In 2008, the United States accounted for a lopsided 70.1% of all arms transfer agreements with developing nations. Russia was a distant second at about 8%. Don't remember seeing arms dealing as authorities granted to the federal government in the Constitution. Thank you for joining ICN this week. We appreciate your comments and feedback, so keep it coming. See you next time.